On the 15th of April 2006, the very first episode of Series 2 of the Doctor Who revival was broadcast. And on that particular evening, 20 years ago, a 12-year-old clapping penguin sat down to his very first ever Doctor Who episode, New Earth. And here I am, 20 years later, and still a fan of the show. But not just a fan of the modern series, but of the classics as well. Now, I cannot deny that it wasn't until the following year, 2007, when you had Martha Jones travelling in the TARDIS with the 10th Doctor, that I then got into the classics, or started collecting the DVDs of the classics that were out at the time. But thinking back 20 years ago, to that particular Saturday evening, when I sat down to watch New Earth, 12 years old, not exactly in one of the best points of my life, but when I sat and watched Doctor Who for the first time, I distinctly remember I was encapsulated by it. From that very first scene of the 10th Doctor and Rose Tyler walking out of the TARDIS onto that field of apple grass, and watching the hovercars fly past, it was absolutely, I suppose, phenomenal would be the best word to use. But yeah, I absolutely enjoyed every minute of it. And even though it had a returning villain from Series 1, I believe, Cassandra, Lady Cassandra Delta 17, I think her name was, returning from from the second episode of the previous series. And I know New Earth, not exactly the best episode to start off with. However, as I've mentioned, I enjoyed every moment of it, from beginning right through to that almost bittersweet ending for Cassandra when she's in Chip's body. Apologies for spoilers if you haven't seen the episode, but yeah, when she's in Chip's body, and obviously, and the 10th Doctor takes her back to that night, just the last night anyone had ever to the last time someone had said she was beautiful. And I don't know, it was, as I say, it was very bittersweet. And thinking back on it, it is still a very bittersweet ending to an episode. And I will never forget the sting of the theme, and as it played. And then you had the next time trailer for the next episode, which was Tooth and Claw, and again, absolutely encapsulated. And I honestly could not wait until next Saturday. But of course, I had to, because obviously it was still on terrestrial television back then. But I absolutely loved it. And here I am, 20 years later, still a fan of Doctor Who. Again, as I mentioned, I didn't get into the classics until 2007. There were quite a few classic stories I actually started collecting. Interestingly enough, my first, kind of interesting really, that my two first Doctors were both the most popular ones at the time. The fact that David Tennant was my first modern Doctor, and my first classic Doctor was Tom Baker. Admittedly, my first ever classic Doctor Who story, if I remember rightly, was The Keeper of Traken. Again, not exactly one of the better ones to start off with, but at the same time, I think what I loved about it was how different it was. Not just the title sequence, but the music, and and the set design and costuming and just literally how different it was. In fact, thinking about it, the fact that my very first classic Doctor Who companion, apart from the returning companion in Sarah Jane Smith with School Reunion the year before, my first actual classic companion would have been Adric. um, and I don't know. Actually, really enjoyed it. But though the four particular stories I had or got at the time were, of course, the Keeper of Traken, Logopolis, and Castrovalva, part of the New Beginnings box set, and the other one that I picked up that particular day, if I remember, I think was Revelation of the Daleks, which was my first Colin Baker, and Castrovalva being my first Peter Davison Doctor Who story. And of course, gradually I built up my collection and obviously delved into each of the other Doctors. I think the next one I delved into, I think it might well have been John Pertwee. I think. But yeah, my first Pertwee story, if I remember, I think was either Spearhead from Space, or the other one you had around at the time. I think it was the Three Doctors. I think, and I think by watching the Three Doctors, it then enticed me to go back and then check out both William Hartnell's first Doctor and my first ever story with William Hartnell, of course, being An Unearthly Child, the very first Doctor Who story. And of course, Patrick Troughton, and my very first Patrick Troughton story was The Tomb of the Cybermen. Admittedly, not only was it one of, I think it was one of the only Cybermen stories you had out at the time, other than The Invasion, which I think had only recently released the previous year, from what I can remember, on DVD. So you had a bit of animation with that. But yeah, and then of course eventually I delved into Sylvester McCoy and Paul McGann. Although possibly Paul McGann before Sylvester, even though they both appear in the TV movie. I saw Paul McGann in the TV movie first, and then I think my very first Sylvester McCoy, proper Sylvester McCoy story, was The Curse of Fenric. And I distinctly remember absolutely enjoying that as well. And the fact I've just been collecting and enjoying the series since.